So Gilbert, Arizona has really transformed from this sleepy cow town to this really lively and trendier area, particularly in the past like 5-6 years. And historically, Gilbert really has been known as a super family-friendly area and for its safety. But with all this change and this growth that we've seen in the past handful of years, a lot of people are like, is it a safe place for me and my family to move to? Well, this recent article actually was published and was highlighting that the FBI crime reporting program actually highlighted or showed that Gilbert was the second safest big city, keyword is big city, and this was based on crime per capita, based per 1,000 residents. And at first glance, you're like, that's lovely. But then if you look at other resources, neighborhoodscout.com is one that I use frequently. They actually have a measurement of safety, 0 being the least safe area and 100 being the safest area. And Gilbert actually only received a score of 43. So on one hand, we have Gilbert being the second safest big city in America. And then on the other hand, we only received a score of 43 out of 100, and that doesn't look too good. The math ain't mathin'. So this is what we're going to unpack today. Is the safety level of Gilbert enough for you and your family to live here comfortably? And the second thing is, with all the growth that we've seen in Gilbert, is Gilbert still as safe of a community as it once was hailed to be? And before we proceed, this is something that's really, really important to highlight, is that safety is very much subjective. What one person might identify as a safe area, the other person might very well be like, I'm not living there. That is not the right place for me. I don't feel comfortable in that neighborhood. So because of this, one of the best ways to really explain the safety level in Gilbert and the crime level is really to compare it to other areas or other cities that you're already familiar with, whether it's nationally or here specifically in the Phoenix metro area. So let's go back to neighborhoodscout.com, where we got that score of 43 out of 100. So something you gotta keep in mind is that Gilbert is a fairly large city. It's currently over 276,000 people. And something to keep in mind is when you have an area where there's more people in a certain geographical region, crime is going to increase. Now, Gilbert is not Manhattan. It's not, Chicago, but it is a lot more concentrated than, a small rural town in Nebraska. So when we go back to Neighborhood Scout and actually look at the cities that are getting that really high ranking, closer to 100, all the cities are really small towns. So all of the top 50 safest cities, according to Neighborhood Scout, and this is based on crime per capita, those cities were all small communities, mostly of between like 20 to 50,000 people. There were a couple communities that were like 70, 80,000 in that top 50 cities. However, a majority of them were, a fifth, a sixth the size of Gilbert. Another important thing to consider is whenever you're using one of these online platforms and looking at crime, often when they first give you that crime ranking, they aren't looking or they aren't separating violent from property crime. And obviously those are two very different things. So for Gilbert, the violent crime, you can see right here, it was 1.17. So that's for every 1,000 residents, one person was a victim or reported an incident of violent crime. As far as property crime, a little bit higher, we were around 10. So that means 10 for every 1,000 residents, or approximately 1% of residents here had reported some form of property crime in Gilbert. Now, another resource that I often recommend my clients, my personal clients use, particularly if they are relocating from out of state, is crimegray.org. And the reason why I like using this as a tool is it gives a really broad perspective of Phoenix Metro as a whole and where some of the higher pockets of crime are. In this map, there's a color ranking system. So red indicates that there's higher crime per capita, and then you go to yellow towards the green, and the darker grade of green actually indicates that there's a lower crime per capita, or in other words, it's safer. And like I mentioned a moment ago, you want to look at the difference between property and violent crime, so you have an idea too, like, hey, are my Amazon packages getting stolen off my front porch, or am I getting robbed at gunpoint? Now, I wouldn't say this pertains as much to Gilbert. This is more general in Phoenix Metro, but we do see a lot of differences from block to block. So it's important to really start to focus in on specific areas and break that apart before you completely eliminate it as a possibility or a place for you to live. And something else to consider is these websites, both neighborhoodscout.com and crimegray.org, these are websites, you have to do research beyond looking at these websites. And some of it you want to take with a grain of salt, because let's look into Gilbert for a minute here. Okay, look Screen across the board looks pretty good. And then we have this little pocket down here that's red. So at first we would look at that and be like, oh my gosh, I want to stay away from that area. It must be a high crime area. Because I live here and I work here, I know that that area is actually a pretty nice 55 plus community or active adult community. So it's a little surprising, but that's where you almost want to look into it further and see, okay, is this property crime? Is this violent crime? And then making sure that your research doesn't stop just at this website, that you're looking at other resources, which is bringing me to my next resource I recommend my clients use, and that's the community crime map. And the reason why I love this resource, it actually shows you what crimes were reported in that specific area, and you can change the timeline. You can make it for the past week, you can make it for the past 3 months, whatever you want to do. And they also have different parameters, so you can actually select what type of crime. Like maybe you could see how many homes reported robbery or burglary, or how many car thefts were there. Those sort of things you can actually filter out. So this is particularly a great resource if you've already kind of figured out, like, okay, I want to live in the East Valley area, or more specifically, I want to live in Gilbert, but I want to know in this region where I'm looking at a house, is this area okay with me? Am I okay with the reports that have happened in this geographical location? When you look into that area trilogy that I was just showing you, that was bright red on the crimegray.org, if you look here, we aren't really seeing any reports of crime. So that's the reason why it's so important to really look at all these resources and really figure out what's kind of going on, being your own detective in a way. Now, all these resources that I introduced, they are great tools, particularly when you're living out of state, or if you can't, drive down to the community, but nothing replaces actually getting your boots on the ground and driving around a neighborhood to determine if it's the right fit for you. And if you are driving around and you feel like it's fairly safe, I always recommend people get out of the car, walk those streets, particularly when people are off work, like in the evenings or in the weekends, because that's how you'll get a true feel of a certain location, and there won't be any surprises after you move into that area. And another thing I really encourage my clients to do too is go to the local gas station, the closest gas station, the pharmacy, the grocery store, because the people in there are going to be the people that most likely live in that area. And if they don't live there, they're people that most likely work in that specific region. When you're comparing Gilbert to other areas in the Phoenix metro area, the city has been ranked as the safest area in Phoenix Metro when we're looking at crime per capita. And Queen Creek was actually a very close second. It received a score of 42, so it was 1 point behind Gilbert, according to neighborhoodscout.com. Now, if you want to learn more about Gilbert, I do have this playlist right here highlighting the good, the bad, neighborhoods, houses, all the good stuff. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. Take care.